quick reminder, hit your got it. That's our first reminder that these calls are recorded. So please don't record them. These are proprietary, live on the back end of the Y.E.S Syndicate. Please keep your microphones muted until we get into Q&A, or unless we jump into an area where we're asking for your responses, questions, that sort of thing. It'll just keep the background noise down to a minimum. Appreciate that. And again, be cordial. We're all professionals, so I don't think you need to cover any more of that. I'm going to dive into a topic tonight, and then Jim and I have got some fun things that we're going to cap this call off with. So please stick around for the end. We are going to be starting our first contests this month, so you'll have a month for that, and then we've got some bigger stuff planned as well that Jim will cover at the end of the call tonight. So do stick with that. And again, I want to reach out to all of you and ask what it is you hope to get out of these calls, what it is you're hoping to get out. So you can reach out to us on our texts, give us a call, email us. It's kind of hard in the chats if you're getting into detail like that, but even then, put it in there. If there's more ground you'd like us to cover, something specific, reach out. That's what we're here for. And please get involved in the dialogue at the end of this. This is where we get to tap into your guys' specialties and skills and insights as well. So that's for the whole group. So that being said, I'm diving in. This week's we are in the develop section of our values, and I'm going to be covering personality tests. And I don't know how many of you have with employment taken personality tests. There are a lot of them out there. The Myers-Briggs and the DISC test, and there are several others. So I'm going to kind of skim the surface on a lot of those, and we're going to talk about some of that and why it may be relevant, why it may not. You're going to get a couple of angles from me on that tonight. But first, I'm going to recap a little bit with Jim last week on our call, and Jim's training was on values. And I came across in my favorite book of all time on leadership is John Gardner. I know that's going to come up. On leadership. Can't get it. There we go. John Gardner on leadership. And here's one of his quotes. It said, "The leaders who we admire the most help to revitalize our shared beliefs and values. They have always spent a portion of their time teaching the value framework." And so, we're talking leadership. My first call was the difference between leadership and management. Jim hit it on values, and the two are intricately intertwined. And we're going to see there's even a tie on personalities that we're going to be tying into. So these things are it's like a tapestry. We've got threads they're just bonding together in what we're trying to do as entrepreneurs and make ourselves better and give ourselves that edge. So sometimes our values conflict with entrenched ideas, entrenched management styles, entrenched hypocrisies, and even conflicts in values. And I just want to remind everyone, I had read this. It said, Jesus didn't just comfort the afflicted, he afflicted the comfortable. And so this isn't about just getting along and making everybody happy and everything's going to be ooh gaga and sunshine, rainbows, and happy flowers. There comes a point where there's going to be conflict, and how you recognize that and deal with that, it has to do with personalities. How your personality might or might not mesh with other people's. If you're staffing, if you're looking to staff, hire, or if you're part of somebody else's staff, understanding that personality profile is very valuable in those regards as well. So I'm going to start off with a story, because we all like stories. And the more I thought about this, the more I thought it couldn't be more relevant. So a little stage background here. I was in the military, National Guard, and I joined when I was, I think, 19 years old. And so went into the ROTC program. So I became a cadet, and I was still in the National Guard. So I was an NCO at that time, Hard Stripe Sergeant, E5, but I was also a cadet. So that's in officer training. So I was kind of in this limbo area, where I'm not an officer, I'm not really enlisted, I'm kind of both. And it was an interesting program because I had a lot more leeway to do a lot more things in leadership that typically NCOs didn't have a chance to do. And I actually got to write RTEP missions for entire tank battalions across the state, which was kind of fun. So at that point, I started that when I was 20. By 21, I was writing RTEP missions. Got to fly around in it's the governor's plane at the time, and it was shared with the general of the Montana National Guards. So I felt pretty special just being this young kid, college kid, wet behind the ears, Eastern Montana coyote killing, radical entrepreneur turned college student. And so I was kind of living the dream in that regard. But I was really, again, naive, but I found some power in just the people skills that I had developed along the way. So one of the things that I got to do was I got to be a tank commander. I was trained as a gunner, that school trained a gunner on an A1 tank. And then I became a tank commander. So, and in the tank commander, you've got the driver, you've got the loader, you've got the gunner, and then the tank commander who runs the whole show. And being in the National Guard, you get people who come from a lot of different branches of service to fulfill, their service or to carry out different things. So I had the really unique opportunity to have an infantry scout, an MP, former military policeman, and a Coast Guard member that got on my tank crew. So they knew nothing about armor, absolutely nothing. And I got to train them. And I had them for 6 months. And then we went to our live fire training exercise at Gowan Field in Idaho. And we were shooting on a live fire tank exercise against the 6th Army, or the 1st Army Group, I believe it was. And they were out of Texas. So these are people who are full-time active duty soldiers. They do nothing but train, right? That's their full-time occupation. I'm a National Guardsman, and we do this once a month. And I've got, again, an infantry scout, a Coast Guard, a military policeman. That's my training crew. And 6 months, we went through that live fire course, and we actually had the highest scores on it. We had first round target hits, ammo conservation. We went through it in record time. And we got called into the command tower. And the general of the Army group from Texas said, "I want to meet your crew." He said, I'm just so impressed with what you guys did out there. And I said, well, he asked, how long have you guys been training together? And it was actually less than 6 months at that point in time. So when I introduced all of them, I introduced them as a Coast Guard member, a scout, and a military policeman. And he absolutely couldn't believe it. And so the point of the story is, how was I able to accomplish that? A young kid coming in, and I'll tell you how I did it. I did it with intuition and instinct. And it was just being able to know people, being able to read people where they were at, finding their strengths, knowing what I had to do to get the best out of each one of them. And I didn't do it by, brandishing a whip or anything else. We did a lot of cross training. I can tell you that every one of those people sat up in my cupola so they could see what I was seeing from the tank commander's position. So when I was giving a command, gunner, sabo, tank, they knew exactly what I was seeing and asking for. So did the driver, so did the loader. We cross-trained on every position so that they could see the big picture, and that way we all had the same vision. And it really was like, you won't think about armor this way, running a tank, but it was like ballet. When everything's clicking and working, it's just smooth and it's actually beautiful. And to be able to tap into that was a skill that I don't want to say it's natural or inborn, because I think it was something that I developed through all my working relationships. All the different jobs that I had, dealing with different people from all walks of life, having different employers who who demanded of me different things and taught me different tasks in many different ways. And so I realized that not only did I learn things differently, but that other people taught things differently. And so trying to pick up on those things, and it kind of made me the person that I was. And so the ultimate thing I'm telling you here is these skills can be learned, but you have to be direct about recognizing it and being intentional about it. Okay, so tapping into that. And that's why we're going to talk about personality tests here for a little bit. But the first thing that I want you to know is I was reading another book in preparation for this tonight. I retook my Briggs-Myers personality test. Do what you are, right? And I'm telling you, it's been years since I've taken that particular personality test, and I've taken the DISC test a couple of different times, including once at church. And you learn different things, but it's not much different in some respects than even astrology. What's your sign? Well, I'm an Aries, I'm a Ram, so I have these particular characteristics. My wife is a Pisces, and and I don't believe in astrology, because you can read any of those horoscopes and it can be for anybody, anytime, anywhere. And I kind of think that way in some respects about personality tests. We are all a combination of different personalities. We all have dominant traits and non-dominant traits, but they always say, well, you're dominant this. Well, it depends on the situation. I'm a situational chameleon. I'm going to do whatever's required to get things done, to best get along, to understand people, to teach and train people, depending on the situation. And that's something that when you start getting pigeonholed into, well, I'm this type of personality. Here's another one. Many of you have probably heard of this, the birth order. Now, have any of you, give me a waiver, something in the chat. Somebody put something in the chat that says if you're like a firstborn or a middle child, what you're doing there. Because if you haven't, I'll tell you, there's a whole philosophy on that. So I'm an anomaly because I am a middle child. There you go, youngest child. There are issues with younger children. Firstborn, only child, I like it, and a middle child. So there are different traits and characteristics that you all are supposed to possess, if you believe the gurus in this area, about your birth order. And I mess all of those up too, because again, I'm a middle child, but I'm also the oldest boy. So I had 3 older sisters and then 2 younger brothers. So I'm like a firstborn male as a middle child. And I was also like an only child until I had my next younger brother for 3 years. So we're all a combination of all these different things. So that being said, we have to know what our assets are, trying to understand our own skill set, where we fit in that paradigm, and kind of do that evaluation. So the important thing here is people are not your most important asset. I got this quote out of from a Nucor Steel executive. He said, people are not your most important asset. The right people are. And so ask yourself this, are you the right person? You have to be that right person, because you need to be your most important asset. So Nucor Steel, here's a real quick story. This is a steel company, and they actually had great success. And what they found was they wanted the farmer work ethic, right? Get up early, go to work, get your job done, put your nose to the grindstone, don't complain, do what you have to do what's necessary. Weather doesn't bother you, time doesn't bother you, seasons don't bother you, you just have to do what's necessary. And so they figured they couldn't teach people a farmer work ethic, but they could teach anyone how to work steel. And so they moved their steel plants into farming communities. Brilliant strategy. Go where the workers are that you want. And they had great success with that. And Yeah, I think for a while, even the Flathead Valley here, where Jim and I live, there were several organizations that brought big businesses, large businesses here, because they thought we had that same talent pool. And that, I think that's true in some regards, but when you put in a major call center, that's not really what our work ethic is designed to do. Sit behind a desk and be on a phone. So things can change a little bit. But when you're placing greater weight on one character attribute than non-educational background stuff, practical skills, specialized knowledge, or even work experience, when you can place all of the important stuff that you want on values as opposed to all those other things, doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or Yale or another Ivy League school, it doesn't matter how many years of experience you had, if you don't have that work ethic people are looking for, it just doesn't matter. And that's where it gets into that personality. A work ethic becomes a part of your personality. And what they wanted, this new core steel, they wanted little things. They wanted people to be teachable. They wanted dimensions of character, including the work ethic, basic intelligence. This is a great term. I love this, and I'm going to adopt this. Basic intelligence is common sense. And it seems like common sense isn't so common anymore, but I'm going to start calling it basic intelligence. Maybe we can change that in the entrepreneur world. And then a dedication to fulfillment of commitments. That's accountability. And any of you, I know Jim, Will, you've read my book, and those are two of the characteristics that I have in there: accountability, teachability, and work ethic. Actually, three of those are right in there in the value set. So I think that's a pretty awesome statement in those. And this is what, in another book that I was looking at, and again, this does get to personality. So I'm going to get around, I'm going to this from a back door, but Good to Great, a book by Jim Collins. And I know, Jim, this is one of your favorites as well. Put this on your reading list, everyone. We'll probably have it on our website if we don't already. But they did a deep dive into 126 different companies, from Aflac to Winn-Dixie. And they did an analysis, and what they found was 90% of the executives and the successful corporations that rose to the top all came from within that organization. They had worked their way to the top. And how many times do you see a big CEO, going from one corporation to another for a multi-million-dollar package and all this other stuff? That's not where the real successful companies are built. They're built from within. So 90% of them. So 10%, okay, we'll give them that. Some of them are doing it. The other thing was there was no link to how much they paid their top executives and the success of the company. And strategy and planning were not factors either. And they didn't focus on what not to do, but on what they wanted to stop doing. Okay, so it wasn't so much about to do, but what not to do, which is kind of an interesting mindset. And technology, in different corporations, it accelerated transformations, but it did not cause transformations. And problems of managing change and motivating people or creating alignment it just melted away in these top organizations. And what that tells you is it's all about people. So no matter where you're at as an entrepreneur, the success of your business, from customer acquisition to staffing, if you're going to have a larger business and grow from that, it is about the people. And that is the important lesson. So that's where the personality traits come in. How do you read people? So we're going to talk about the Myers-Briggs test just real briefly here. And they have 9 keys when you go through their tests. And you can do these online. You can jump online, and it might take you 20 minutes to do 160 questionnaire, answer 160 questions, and they'll tell you if you're more extroverted or introverted. Most of us have a clue anyway. But they have 8 keys and then 16 types based on the dominant combinations. So it sounds kind of convoluted, and in some respects it is, but it's semi-accurate. And again, I started this whole thing off by saying successful people are chameleons. They will be anything. The good book says, be all things to all men in order to win a few. And I don't think you can get much better than that. We have to be adaptable. We have to be fluid. We have to be able to read people and meet them where they're at. But a 16 profile test, it's almost like astrology then. You're bound to hit, well, see how accurate that is? That, I have 4 of these traits, and so it must be accurate. And then the DISC test, it's narrowed down to 4, dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And those are all character traits all of us should have at least a good portion of. So what are you dominant in? And again, I would venture to say that most of us are flexible. We're riding a roller coaster of our own personality. And part of the reason I bring the whole personality thing up is it's about relationships. It's not just about people. It's about how you develop relationships with those people. And I will tell you that doing these tests is part of the reason they did them in our church once, is it helps you understand your spouse better. It may help you understand your children better. And in that regard, it is valuable. So I think it's interesting, number one. It's not fail proof is the big thing. And I want you, that should be your big takeaway. But going back to personalities, I think where do our personalities come from? Our personalities come from when we were kids, right? Our personalities are developed early. If you were a shy kid, you're probably more introverted. If you were an outgoing daredevil, you're probably more of an extrovert. Those things start early. And so when I was teaching school, a book had just come out, and it was called The Way They Learn. And it was by Cynthia Tobias. And it was a phenomenal book, and I read it. And when I was teaching school, I could see students with all these different character traits. And I'm going to spend just a little bit of time here because she made it really make sense. And it wasn't about personality traits, but learning styles. And when I get back to my story there in the National Guard, where I outshot the regular Army with a brand new tank crew, it was about learning and teaching. Okay. It wasn't about their personalities. And the other thing that I've always said, and it's been my experience anyway in corporate America, if you had a problem with an employee, and I would say this often, I tell bosses this even today, managers today, if you've got a problem, you've either hired wrong or you've trained wrong. In either case, it's on you, right? If you didn't train your employee right, your staff members are doing something wrong, that's on you. If they just don't get it and they'll never get it, that's still on you because you hired the wrong person. So I don't go for a lot of excuses there, but I do believe that if people are willing to learn, you can teach them anything. And I think they're capable of learning anything, and they're capable of doing anything. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think that was possible, and if I didn't believe that was reality. So what Cynthia does is she breaks it down. She said, there are just 2 main things. It's how we perceive the world, how we view the world. And it's either concrete or it's abstract, okay? And we order the world. So it's how we see the world and then how we make sense of the world. And we use 2 things when we order, sequential or random. And I can walk into anyone's office or desk and I can tell you how you view the world, if you're concrete or abstract, and I can tell you how you order things, if you're sequential or random. And when you look at someone's backpack, if you look at their desk in school, if you look at their notebooks, if you look at how they take notes, you know what their learning style is. And once you have that figured out, you can do just about anything. So concrete, you're using 5 senses. There's no hidden messages, right? What you see, feel, touch, see, that's what you get. The abstract is you've got intuition and intellect, and you can think outside the box and see problems from a different angle. A lot more imagination comes into play. Things are not always what they seem. And then sequential, organizing, it's linear, step by step by step. My wife is concrete sequential. That's how she perceives the world. She's in the medical profession. It's linear. It's just, if you're doing a differential diagnosis, for medicine, you have to follow the logical steps. And then random is you order in chunks. You can start at the back, you can start in the middle. You don't have to start at the beginning and go to the end. You can start anywhere and work your way through. And I've got 2 kids that are random, right? And they work best in a random field. And if you try and sit them down and do things in order, 1 step, 2 step, you lose their interest, you lose their time. So I think that's probably the easiest way to look at things is, how do people process information? And if you can figure out how people are processing information and meet them where they're at, you're going to save yourself a whole lot of time and heartache in trying to acquire customers that will be long-term customers, customers that are going to be happy to be your customer, people who want to work for you and are glad to work for you and will do their best for you. So if you're building sales teams, if you're building a network of organizations and networks of people, understanding those things will be helpful. So I encourage all of you, jump online and take a personality test and see what it says. And I actually did a whole page of notes on what mine were. And again, that's when I was done reading it, I thought, man, that really is more like a horoscope, because I like a lot of what it's telling me. I'm amicable and persuasive and charismatic and determined and outgoing, right? Under my teacher things. And this was on the Myers-Briggs. And a commander, I'm a strategic leader and motivated to organize change, quick to see inefficiency, and conceptualize new solutions. I enjoy developing long-range plans to accomplish a vision. And those are all true. And those come from a personality test. And then the other one, a counselor, creative nurturers with a sense of personal integrity and a drive to help others realize their potential. And I thought, man, they must have been writing this for me as a young entrepreneur syndicate instructor, because all of these things are true. But I can tell you, when I look at their overall profile for me, I don't see me in it. I see some of these characteristics being spot on, but I don't fit their paradigm. So it can be accurate, but just to take a look at yourself and say, where do I fit? What can I work on? How do other people perceive me? And this is one of the tests that I had seen in one of the books I've been reading. I'll have to go back and figure out which one it was. I'm one of those multiple readers at a time. I think I'm usually got 5 or 6 books going on at a time. But it said, what are the top 3 characteristics? If somebody asked, somebody went to your employees, one of your employees or somebody you work with, and said, what are Russell's top 3? How would you describe it? Or how would you describe Will? Give me his top 3 characters. What stands out to you? Or Jim? And then ask yourself this: would you be answering the same way that other people are? That's the real test. How we see ourselves and how other people see us should align, right? We want that to align. So take one of these personality tests and figure out where you are in there. Is that how you want the world to perceive you and your personality? And if not, maybe it's time to do some digging. Maybe it's time to ask your friends, your coworkers, your spouse, your kids, what is it you would like to see me do better? What can I work on? Am I short-tempered? Am I losing focus too easy? Am I too driven? It's one of those things that if we're going to progress as entrepreneurs, we're going to have to meet people where they're at, and we're going to have to meet ourselves where we're at. And that gives us a whole lot of work to do. So anyway, I've taken up, there's more I could do on that. Ultimately, I'd like for your takeaway is to dig deep on your character and do one of these tests. And if you don't mind, when you're done, send me an email and just say, how accurate do you think it was? And if you got anything out of it. So shoot me an email when you're done with that. That's kind of a little project. I'm going to open it up for questions, comments. If anyone's got a story, if I've struck a nerve somewhere, bothered you somehow, I want to hear about it. And then before we're done, we'll turn this back over to Jim for May contest.
Hey, Rod, I had a story here. So when I was racing professionally for General Tire, which was my sponsor, they had a staff member that was at all the races. And a couple years into the relationship, she says, "Hey, Jim, we got to work on your attitude a little bit." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" She says, "Well, a lot of people think that you're arrogant in the race world." I'm like, "That's so weird. Like, why do they feel that way?" And the reality is, I don't know a stranger, but what I didn't think about in that scenario is that I was in a public forum with people, fans around the race team. And I was always in business mode. Like, we got to get the vehicle ready. I got to take care of my team. I got to make sure I got the sponsor shirt on. I do the interviews right. But I was leaving out the component of the fans and what their needs were. And their perception was an arrogance, as opposed to a guy just got his head down, working his butt off to go out and win a race. And I think understanding your own personality traits, who you are and what's important and how you're perceived is a critical task. So I love that you brought up this topic, because it works not only for ourselves, and they can be done, I don't want to say often, but maybe once every other year, because we all change as we get older. Our scenarios change, where we work, who we surround ourselves with. And it's good to kind of cup check where you're at and what others think of you, and if it aligns with what these tests say about you. And as you get good at this and understanding the behavioral patterns of people, then you can play into those relationships, because you'll be able to identify these characteristics, and you'll understand intuitively how to interact with them, how to make a sale, how to conduct a deal. I'm thinking about Will doing interviews in his podcast. You'll understand how to transform your questions into that personality trait and extract more from them to bring more value to the equation, whether that's an interview or a business relationship or a project that you're working on together, right? So understanding personality traits is so critical, not only your own, but other people's. And the only way you're going to get to do that is I've taken so many of these tests over the years. It seems like every corporate company I worked for, every time I got a raise, they're like, "Well, we got to do the Myers-Briggs or whatever the test of the season was." But I've seen a lot of value out of it. So Rod, it's probably time I take another test. So I'll jump online and do one, and I'll send you the notes.
That sounds good, Jim. I appreciate that. You just reminded me when I was at advanced camp for officer training, I had the commander come up to me, my commander from, he was the professor of military science, a lieutenant colonel, well-decorated Vietnam veteran. And he came up to me, he saw me interacting with my platoon at one point, and he came up to me afterwards. He said, "Hey, Rod, I don't want to interfere, but I just want to tell you," he said, "you need to tone yourself down a little bit here. Everyone's evaluating everything you do here. Everyone's looking at you. Everyone's, taking notes on how you interact with people." And he said, you just are, you're cocky." That's what he called me. He called me cocky, right? I'm a soldier. And I was this young kid. So at the time, I'm 20 years old. This is 1 year after, I couldn't find my way on an airplane. I almost got hijacked by a cult member, right? So this is a year later. And I looked at him, I just said, "I've got this," right? I did. I was confident, and I knew it was confidence. And whatever he was seeing, I thought was a misread. But I stood firm. I didn't change. I didn't react to what somebody else told me I needed to do, especially about my own actions. But it was my intuition, and I trusted my intuition at that point. So, it turns out I was voted the top cadet, in that whole thing by my peers, as well as the cadre. So yeah, at some point we can be mislabeled, and people don't understand. Like you said, they thought you were arrogant. You're just focused. You were working. And so we have to make sure when we're labeling other people, we're not mislabeling them, because that can go a long way to defeating good qualities. You want to build up the good qualities, not throw water on them. So I think there's a good caution in that for all of us as well. Anybody else? Has anyone else taken one of these personality tests? Is it just Jim and I? Have we been the only ones fortunate enough to have to do these several times?
I had to take a couple of them. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Will.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. All right. I had the unfortunate ability to I had to take a couple of them in high school, and I found they were completely useless because it was so easy to game it to exactly the type of personality you wanted to display. And it's just, I don't know. I took them multiple times and I always got a different answer. At least that was always my experience.
Did you answer them honestly, Will? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Did you answer them honestly?
Mhm.
Or were you trying to manipulate them?
I actually did both. At first, I always did them honestly because I wanted to have an honest effort. Um, but every time I did them honestly, I got different answers. And that just continued on for, I think, 2 or 3 years. We had to take them. We had to take them in middle school too. Actually, now that I think about it, I think it was the Myers Briggs. And then it got to a point where we're in the computer lab, and I'm just like, well, it's not like I'm being graded on this, so let's see what kind of personality I can gin up. And after that, I mean, that was sort of the end of it. I don't know. I just never had too much good luck with it. Like you said, it felt sort of like a horoscope.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's like Jim said, there's value in this, and they wouldn't, corporate America wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't some value. If they didn't have valid data to substantiate the amount of money they do, to evaluate a whole pool of employees and sometimes thousands and tens of thousands, they wouldn't do it. So there must be some value, and I'll say that first. Secondly, because Will, I know you're a writer as well. And so I would encourage you to take another look at this, whether it's the Myers-Briggs or whichever. Take another look at it from a different stance. With writers, it's man versus man versus himself, man versus society, man versus nature, right? I mean, it's the conflict. And I think these could be valuable tools on character development in fiction writing. So if you think about that, you don't want to have a character that you start developing one way and then all of a sudden he does something that's out of character, right? So it's the people who understand this and understand how people are wired, so that we can get some sort of consistency. The idea is you're trying to minimize wild cards, right? This is a poker game. And if you can label all your cards, if you can figure out who the queens and the aces and the kings and the jacks are, so you're not messing with the acey deuces, right? You want to stack your deck. And so if there's any these, and I believe there is some, I think we have an obligation to try and tap that. It's a resource. So I'm encouraging you to take another test and do it honestly and look at it from a different perspective. I'm not going to ask for a book report, but something similar.
Sure. Do you have a good place where I could go find one? Because now I'm curious.
Just look up online Myers-Briggs or Briggs-Myers, or you can Google personality test, and they've got some online. I jumped onto one of the free ones, and then of course they want you to pay if you want all the deep answers, but I just got the synopsis. So you can just Google it and find something, and 160 questions, and 30 minutes of your time, you'll be done.
Cool. I'll give it a whirl.
Good job. Anyone else out there? Jim, I got your message, just so you know.
Great.
I know that you're shuttling kids, but I'll reach
That's
back
all right.
out to you and do that unless you can chat.
No, I can talk now. I'm empty car finally.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I have taken a personality test for my recent employer starting in December. First time I've taken one. It was a Gallup strengths poll.
Not familiar with that.
I found the questions very ambiguous. There were times where I was looking at the question going, boy, I could go either way. I feel like I'm right in the middle. And some questions I didn't answer because I was so torn of which direction I would fall. The time was up. And other questions, sometimes I would just choose. And the way the results came out, at first I was kind of like, boy, that's not what I felt my strengths were. And I kind of thought back to the test and I thought, well, boy, this could have easily completely fallen a different way. if I would have just answered, one way or the other when I didn't know. And I guessed like, well, I think this one. And then the other part of me is like, well, maybe subconsciously I did pick the right one and this is the right information. And this is the true personality that I should have. So I have the report. I'm happy to share that, or at least pass along kind of like what some of the top. I think they gave us the top 6.
How,
And
how
again,
many
for corporate, go
how
ahead.
many questions did it have, Jim?
It was a lot. I don't know if it was 160. I took it. It was probably 5 months ago.
Okay.
It was a lot of questions. It was probably easy over 100. Don't know if it was 160 though.
Okay. One thing I do know about when you get the multiple tests like that with lots of questions, they know that you're going to be falling in the middle on some of those, or you'll go one way one time and another way another time. So they ask this a similar question in a different way to try
Yes, I
and
remember that.
narrow in. My next question is, was that a pre-employment test that they gave you,
No.
or was it after hire?
It was after hire.
Okay.
And interestingly, as I got paired with other employees and they kind of gave me a partner to work with, kind of like an onboarding person, his personality was complete complement to mine. I asked my boss, she said she did not use the test to figure out. She picked someone she just naturally felt would be a good mix for me.
Mhm.
But as I looked at the Gallup strengths, into what his were and what mine were, we were a very good fit on paper. And subsequently, over the last couple of months, we've worked out extremely well together. So, that kind of tells me from personality standpoint that, it's a good fit and there is some value in kind of pairing the strengths and weaknesses of people.
I'm going to point to something else with what you just said there, and that's the intuition of your supervisor who paired you.
Yeah.
So she was able to pick up on that without using a test, and that intuition. So that's something that is a natural maybe for that person, or it was just a gut, a click, something that was, in a blink moment, that was the person for you. But that's good leadership, so that's a good thing. But I can see definite value in that story from 2 different angles. So thanks for that, Jim.
Sure.
And that was, can I write that down again? It was a Gallup what?
I think it was called Gallup Strengths Poll. Once we connect, I'll share with you. I'll send you the report that I've got so you can see like the name and official name,
Okay.
and maybe some of how they present the results.
Yeah, it is, to me, it's fascinating.
Guys, we went through a similar exercise.
Anything we can do to up our game again.
Right,
ahead,
I was just going to say we went through a similar exercise in the RT Syndicate where we did it was a free survey and it was really extensive. It was probably over 200 questions, and like what Jim experienced, a lot of them are meant to see which way you'll go because it could go either way. But through doing that several times, it gives them a key indicator of your direction. And I was amazed at how accurate it was. I mean, none of this is perfect, but it does give you a general idea more than just guessing. So I'll try to find out what survey that was because it was another free one. I enjoyed doing it. It took probably 20 minutes to do it, but it was worth it.
And I hadn't thought of this when I was doing this exercise, Jim, but when you and I were working on our marketing campaign, as far as how we wanted our image, our branding, we did a value exercise, which is similar but different to this. It's like, how do you view your business? How do you view, your world? What's your worldview? Which was like, what's the personality of your business? And so you can take this personality test and apply it to business. And how do you brand your business? What do you want people to perceive about your business? And so it does dovetail very, very well into that regard as well. So value all the way around. Well, that's all I've got. I'm going to wrap it up unless there are more questions. I didn't see any other hands up, nothing else in the chat. So Jim, if you want to go ahead and do a preview of what's coming next.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Good job on the assessment test as well. Hey, a couple of things. I interviewed somebody for my podcast today. And I enjoyed this show so much because this person's motto, and his name is Costa, and he's a brand innovation expert working with NASA and a lot of governmental agencies, a lot of tech stuff. And what I love that he said to me is anything is possible, right? And here you go. This is a guy that says for it to be innovative, labeled as innovative, it has to be new and useful. And he's like, we start with a whole bunch of ideas and we continue to narrow those down to find that one that works, right? And I added to his point of anything is possible. I also think that we need to be bold in believing that, or at least volunteering that. Now, I know thematically we're about being entrepreneurs here, but some of us work for other people. And if we believe that anything's possible, we can bring value by being bold and going to our bosses, our superiors, or the owners of the company and say, hey, I've got an innovative idea. So I was inspired by that call today. I just think, hey, anything's possible and be bold. All right. So, one of the things that I was inspired by, and it was actually one of the first things I said to Rod when we started this group, is I was a big proponent of Gary Vaynerchuk and his marketing company and his messaging. And this was pre-COVID, at least a year or two pre-COVID, when I heard this message from Gary Vee. And he says, look, I'm tired of people saying they can't make any money, or they don't have enough money, or they can't get a job, right? And they're suffering because they can't find work. Well, I'm calling bullshit on that. And the story that Gary gave was, look, you can make money anywhere. And he said, on Craigslist, there's a section there that says free items. And if you go to those free items, you can find whatever's on that list, find something that resonates. You can go get that free item, bring it back and flip it. And his example was guy in New York City, Manhattan, saw a free couch on Craigslist over New Jersey, took the subway over to Jersey, picked up the free couch, brought it back home, cleaned it up a little bit and flipped it for $20. And Gary's like, look, don't tell me you can't find money. Money's everywhere. And before I moved to Montana, we were looking, packing up and different things. I thought, I'm going to play around with this notion of flipping things and making money or pulling money from nowhere. And I started going through the garage of useless stuff that I had, and took my first trip to the pawn shop as a seller. I've been to pawn shops before, but never selling anything. And I started bringing stuff in like, hey, what do you give me for this? Hey, what do you give me for that? And then it became a game and a challenge to see how much money I could make off of, literally something either sitting around or nothing. So what I told Rado I wanted to do is I wanted to have what I'm calling the biggest flip. Okay, so for the month of May, for the syndicate, here's the message. Who says you can't make money? We often hear people complain about the struggles in life and the lack of having enough money. I say bullshit. The first contest of the Young Entrepreneurs Syndicate will be about the biggest flip. And here are the rules. Buy something or get something you plan on flipping. Modify, market, brand, clean, feed, or do nothing, and then sell it for the profit. Okay. The winner will be the person that has the biggest gap between the purchase price and the sales price by May 31st. Okay. End of the month. And what's required is that you have to deduct the expenses from the profits to keep it fair, save your receipts of the proof of purchase, and please save the proof of sale. Now, if you did that on Facebook Marketplace, just screenshot it, but give the group something to hold you accountable that you got it for free, or you paid $1 or $20 or whatever it is. And then when you sell it, do the same. If you sold it to the pawn shop, get a receipt or whatever. Okay. Now, the price for this is going to be a box of goodies from Y.E.S, at least $100 value. But more importantly, you're going to get the glory for the win. And probably more important than that is you're going to get a life lesson on how to flip something and make some money. And hopefully you'll have some fun. Okay. Now, I'm not going to be in the contest, but I will tell you that I've challenged myself to also flip something. And I will tell you that this thing eats and shits all day long. So I bought something. I'm going to flip it by the end of the month and play along with you guys, but I'm not going to be in the contest. So I've got one more fun thing to talk about. So if you have a question on the flip contest, put it in the comments or raise your hand and I'll call on you. If not, get after it starting now. We're also doing a referral program for the next 90 days. So if you refer anybody to Y.E.S, and we only want like-minded people, don't just try to get your brother, sister, or whatever, but like-minded people, have them sign up and mention your name. And at the end of the 90 days, we'll pull a winner from the hat. So every time you get a referral that signs up, you're going to get your name in the hat. And if you refer somebody and they sign up for a year, you're going to get 5 tickets going into the hat. So that's a little extra value. The winner of that, and I don't want to be sexist, but the winner of that's going to get $200 of Montana beef from my cattle company. So we're talking about ribs, steaks, fillets, the whole bit. So if you're interested in having a good dinner, send some referrals our way. It's going to be $200 worth of beef from my cattle company. And I say sexist because I know all of us guys probably like to grill. Not that my wife doesn't do a good grill, but anyways, let's have some fun with it. Let's grow this business. Let's have the biggest flip contest and see what you guys can come up with. And by the way, if you decide you're going to flip a house and make a whole bunch of money, great. Don't forget to deduct the costs. Okay. It's still about the gap in between. All right, Rod, that's my 2 cents. Next week, I'm going to be talking about inspiring, which is one of our 4 core values. And also just some housekeeping. There's all kinds of tools on the back end of the Y.E.S Syndicate. If you go into documents, you'll find all kinds of tools. There is a document about values, which I spoke of last week. And I didn't remind you folks that there's a values tool on there. So looking forward to having some fun, hopefully inspiring you next week with some stories and business tips and tricks. And Rod, thank you again for the topic tonight.
You bet. Thank you all. Everyone who was on here tonight and the people who couldn't make it tonight, they'll be watching this on the back end. So remember, Jim, I like that you think big, flipping a house. I just don't think that can be done in 30 days. So unless you get a cash buyer, I suppose it's possible, but
there's a challenge right there. Anybody in real estate?
There you go. All right, we're making this fun. We're making this real, and we're having a good time. So everybody, again, thanks. I appreciate your time, your attention. Again, reach out with emails. I think you all have our phone numbers as well if you've got questions during the week. And if not, we will see you next Monday. Thanks.